Good evening. Welcome. If you don't know me, my name is Gerdes. I'm the president of the Lower Beaver Neighborhood Association. We're glad you've come. I also happen to be the pastor of this church, so on behalf of both the Neighborhood Association and the church, welcome. We're glad you're here tonight. Our motto in the Neighborhood Association is that we want to make this a neighborhood that people want to call home. And a huge part of that is making sure that our neighborhood is safe. And a huge part of that is watching out for each other. And so tonight, as part of that, with our neighbors, we gather together to discuss how we can make sure that our neighborhood is going to stay safe. We had, about a month ago, an incident at Woodlawn Park that I'm sure most of you have probably heard about. Right about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, a bunch of people decided it was a good idea to start shooting at each other across the park. Never a good idea. I grew up hunting, and we were always told, don't do that kind of stuff. It seems like a fairly common sense sort of thing, you know. But apparently some people didn't get the message, so we want to make sure that stuff doesn't happen anymore. And so tonight we're hoping that we can come together, brainstorm a little bit, discuss what's actually going on, and maybe come up with some ideas on how we can stop this kind of stuff from happening in our neighborhood in the future. Sound good? I will tell you tonight we are live streaming on YouTube, and there is a link out there for people to watch. So if you would like to speak at any time, I'm going to invite you to come up and use one of the microphones. Please, that way the people online can hear what you're saying, that kind of a thing. So without further ado, I have asked Officer Trudy Polson to come and talk to us tonight about some statistics and give us a little assessment of what's going on in our neighborhood, and especially down by Woodlawn Park.
Thank you, Jeremy. Like Jeremy said, my name is Trudy Paulson. I am the neighborhood officer up here, and I have five total neighborhoods to include this one. So if you're at the meetings, I'm at the meetings giving crime stats, things that go on throughout the neighborhood when we start going back to our meetings. So you're going to have either you have a front and back or 2 pages. So I did calls for service for 2019 to 2020 to date, or from April 20th, 2019 to April 20th, 2020, and that's actually going to be the second page. You will see there were 12 calls for service, and that can be any reason why we would be dispatched to the park. 1 case was generated, no arrests were made. You'll see a chart, like a graph, and in that you'll see the days of the week and then times next to it. And Thursdays between noon and 2 p.m. reflects the highest levels of calls to dispatch. And then on the front page, the first page, this is April 20th of last year until today. 45 calls for service, which is more than, it's about quadrupled the amount of calls. 4 cases generated. Where I got the stats from, it showed 1 arrest, but I was talking to Sergeant Carney, who works over here on the west side. He said that there were 2 more arrests in the recent days that did not reflect on the stats where I had pulled them, and it's possible they just weren't in there yet. So we had Thursday for last year. Sundays between 8 p.m. and 10 p.m. reflect the highest level of calls to dispatch. And what you'll see to the left, it will show different categories of why we were out there. So you have traffic, alcohol offenses, accident citations, drug activity. So the reason why we would be dispatched out there. And at the bottom, you'll see there's 22 other at the bottom. And that can be animal calls, like if there's a stray. We have ARL is used through our dispatch. And so you're going to have miscellaneous calls like that aren't really crime-related. Along with if we have to, like when there was the shooting, if there's shell casings, we dispatch our CSI, so that would reflect in the other. So I was talking with Jeremy and kind of thinking about maybe why we're seeing the increase in the calls and the activity up there. And I think part of it may be, too, is that people are home and seeing the crimes and calling them in, whereas in the previous year, people were at work. People weren't, working from home, and so they weren't seeing the activity. So that could be part of it. And I am open to suggestions as far as like how you think that we can do a better job as the law enforcement aspect of it. I know that we have increased the extra patrol, and when I'm working, I work during the day typically, but I'll just go and sit up at the park. If I have paperwork to do, I'll just go up there, and there's been a couple times where people are pulling in, they see me, and they turn around. So the deterrence aspect of it. And maybe they just wanted to turn around. I don't know. And then I know that Sergeant Brady Carney, he is the supervisor in charge of the patrol officers in this area, and he's well aware of the activity that is going on up there. And I know that he's passed on the information to do some extra patrol paperwork up there, like just for the deterrence. So that is what I have to report, and I am open to whatever you guys have for suggestions that myself or Sergeant Brady and his troops can do to make it a safer place. So if I will leave it to anyone who might have questions or any suggestions. Yes, ma'am. Okay.
Talked with a lieutenant, I can't remember his name, but he had told me that we could maybe put a camera up. There are police cameras. There was some signage that the police could put up.
I'm not sure about the signage. Do you know about the signage?
I do know.
I know the cameras. Here.
I do know that on the initial email that came out on March 10th, which was one day after the shooting, from Jeremy, that Ben Page with Parks and Rec was copied in on that. And there was some discussion about signage being up in the park. I do know that we have used cameras in the past on problem areas or where people like to gather, and thus these problems kind of spawn from that. So that is something that we could put up too. In the area off of Valdez and the trail that comes up to the south side of Woodlawn Park, we'd have to look, generally speaking, the cameras run off of electrical service. So we need something to attach that to power the cameras. And so sometimes we're limited in placement on where we can put those cameras. Just be mindful that obviously people have some concerns about privacy as well. When the cameras are up and running, they're running, and they're filming and they're recording. So it's just something that we have to be mindful about, how much of area that we capture and what actually we're recording, if that would happen to capture a backyard or the side of a house or windows or something of that sort. So that's definitely something that we could look at as far as placement of a camera.
We live adjacent to that walkway.
Okay.
I saw the shooting happen. There is, at the top of the stairs there's room for a solar light. I remember years ago, I
I did a lot of stuff up at Hoover, and we were looking at putting solar lights in on that recreational area up there. And it's not terribly expensive to have a solar light up there, and I'm sure you could attach a camera to that.
Certainly.
One of the other neighbors is concerned that the lights shine out into the park. I know when I walk across the park, which I do every day, if it's dark, it's really dark right there. And I've gone back and forth about what's a good idea, because do you encourage a lot of activity up there if you put a light up there where it's usually kind of dark? So but I do think at this point we do need light, we do need a camera, and I think you could do it with a solar light. And those are not cost prohibitive. As well as, we got electricity at our houses. So somebody could work something out.
Certainly. We can get with our Intel unit. They're the ones who are generally in charge of the cameras and put those up, and see if we can find a spot where that might work. And I think the additional lighting is a good idea as well.
I'm slowly afraid that in my house, I have a stone porch. I don't need a microphone. Okay, that's good. My backyard faces the park too. And for the longest time, I've been taking my grandson to the park. And every time I stop going to the park with my grandson because I have been seeing a lot of drug activity for the longest time. Maybe even 2 months ago, I was walking by during the day to the parking lot, and a woman parking there, they exchanged something with the guy, and bye. And that was in front of us. It's been very, very concerning. I don't know exactly what the solution. Obviously, we would like to have cops there all the time. But we know that we cannot have it. But a camera will be a really good idea. And again, I think there's a lot of kids around in this area, so we definitely need to do something.
From the camera aspect, what are your thoughts as far as the most activity or the most beneficial to have the walkway on the south side of the park be captured under footage, or the parking lot on the north side of the park? Sure.
I think part of the issue is because it is such a secluded park as far as being able to patrol it. You can't drive through. You've got to pull into that parking lot, and you're either going to have to walk through or you're going to have to park on Valdez and come up the sidewalk, which is pretty quiet. Yeah, you can't see because we both have privacy fences, and I've actually put up the green mesh netting like you see on tennis courts and things, because I don't want my dogs interacting with the people in the park or people sticking their hands through. So ours is closed, so I can't see out. I was working and heard the gunshots, and the dogs came flying in the house off the patio. But I think it draws people because it is more secluded, and they feel like they can do things there that they couldn't do in a regular park because there's more access with streets and walkways and things.
I will totally agree with you. The seclusion is great for the park aspect, but it also kind of helps foster those folks that want to come there and hang out for a variety of reasons why they would pick that exact spot. And just so everybody's aware, on the shooting incident from March 9th, there were several shell casings that were found right at the intersection of Lawnwoods and Twana, and there were another set of shell casings right by the walkway on the far south side of the park that goes down between the two houses to Valdez. That is a long ways between two people or two groups of people to be shooting at each other or shooting in general. We don't know where any of those rounds landed or impacted, but that is a long, long ways to be shooting from or at each other.
And it doesn't matter whose house it was, but because we live on either side of that sidewalk, and we maintain that grass and keep it mowed, and she plants flowers, and we try and keep it looking nice. but it's pretty scary to think that we could be out there doing something and get shot.
Absolutely.
How do we not know where those bullets went? Don't bullets go somewhere? I mean, those were a lot of casings that day.
I believe there were 18, if I'm not mistaken.
So where did all those bullets go?
There were several impacts that were in the ground on the south side of the park
Okay.
that our crime scene technicians observed, and the others, I don't know.
So
I
nobody's
don't know. We
house
checked,
was
for the
reported?
folks who live on Tawana, I was up there and a couple other officers were up there knocking on doors, talking to people, speaking with folks. We checked houses, we checked vehicles, and we were not able to locate any property damage or any impacts in the area.
I taught at Hoover for 20 years, a lot of freshmen. And the body language on the kids running up to the park was not menacing. And since they were so far apart, these two groups, and since I know from my friends who are still at Hoover that there is gang initiation going on, where kids are being forced into the gangs under threat from the gang people say, we're going to hurt your families. I'm not so sure that these people were really trying to hurt each other. I'm hoping that the distance was a way to not hurt each other, that it was just all for show. And from what I saw, the body language of the person shooting, it was pretty showy. He was showing off.
But it was a 9mm gun, it's pretty...
Yeah, I mean, they could have hurt each other, and I found another shell. I've got another shell casing.
Okay.
So I'm not familiar with what happened. So I have, to explain time of day, the demographics of the people involved. Are we talking junior high kids, high school kids? Are we talking adults? How many are we talking about? And were they on foot or they were in cars? I mean, give us an idea for those of us who weren't there to understand what we're talking about.
So it was March 9th, Tuesday afternoon, approximately 3 p.m. The information that we received once we got on scene was that a vehicle parked on Tawana to the west of Lawnwoods, a couple houses. Several individuals, 4 or 5 individuals, approximately high school age, exited the vehicle, ran to the intersection of Lawnwoods and Tawana, and fired southbound into the park. There was another group of multiple individuals, approximately the same age, on the far south side of the park by the walkway that goes down to Valdez. Those individuals shot, I don't know which group shot first, but there was an exchange where several, I believe there were 12 casings on the south side of the park and 6 up at the intersection where there were shots exchanged. The group on the south side of the park left via the walkway south towards Valdez, and the group up on Tawana returned to the vehicle and drove back towards Lower Beaver.
It almost sounds like it was a prearranged meeting to me.
Very well could be. I don't know.
Two groups of people to show up on the opposite side of the field by accident.
It would make sense to me that the group in the vehicle showed up because they knew that the group in the park was present.
One observation, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but talking to some of the neighbors a couple days after the incident, my understanding, the vehicle that pulled up, when they left on Tawana, they went eastbound. Is that correct? Okay. So I was talking to somebody when I was up there doing paperwork. I just caught them. They had also witnessed it. And they had said that they went eastbound, which makes me think that they're not from the neighborhood because they know that you can't get out that way. So and that's just my assumption that they're probably not from the neighborhood because they don't know the roads to get out.
We really don't know where those kids came from. We know they went to school, because school didn't get out until 3:30 that day. And they looked school age, but we don't have SROs anymore. So a person I talked to at Meredith the next day was really concerned that she'd heard nothing about it. And if Hoover would still have had an SRO, they would have known about it, and they could have kept their ears open, and that's what SROs did, so. But, so there's nothing we can do, just kind of watch and see if they come back. Call the police.
We did speak with a couple neighbors. Several people have home surveillance systems now. Unfortunately, they weren't pointed at the street. They were watching driveways, doors, yards, like most of them do. So we did not, that I'm aware of, get any good surveillance footage of the vehicle or the individuals. And I have not heard of additional information about identifying the folks who were involved in that incident.
It sounds like, I mean, we can analyze the past event that happened as long, for hours, but in terms of future actions for going forward, so I know there were recommendations for some signage, like even, have you seen a non-emergency, call this number, putting that up in the parking lot. I think additional lighting in the parking lot too, if we could arrange that. And then do we work with the Parks Department to take down that wooden corral around the porta potty? Because I think that line of sight is really critical as well. I know that I've, witnessed probably some drug dealing activity as well on foot and in the car. And so I think if we could have those line of sight areas cut down, that would be really helpful.
And that would be the Parks Department. So Captain Miller, I'm the commander of Third Watch. First of all, I want to commend Sergeant Brady Carney, because he's not even working today, and he's here on his day off. So I really was surprised when I walked in and saw him here. And I'm gonna let you know, you got one of the best neighborhood officers that we have with Trudy. So, but yeah, the parks will deal with that, help you with signage. If you think there's something obstructing vision, they'll help with that. Lighting as well, because those are city parks. So, if you could solicit them to get some additional lighting in the park, that would be where you want to do that from.
Hello, my name is Austin Casser. I'm with Parks and Rec, Recreation Supervisor. I oversee all of the aquatics, but also I'm a liaison for you guys. So a couple of things that I have taken or jotted down was removing those and inviting signage, so we can definitely pass that on and see what we can do. Some other non-traditional ideas that have been passed along. I know that we talked about maybe programming out there. As of right now, we don't quite have the manpower to program out there. However, there's other entities that we could tap into. I know at the Grandview Golf Course, there's a lot of clubs for disc golf. There's pickleball clubs that not necessarily have to be programmed through us, but still use the park. From my experience of any kind of positive usage is going to decrease that negative usage. Another thing that we brought up potentially is doing a park ambassador program. Grabbing a vest like Officer Trudy was talking about. Usually when you see people, and people are up to no good, even I get that as a pool supervisor, I walk in, people straighten up. So having a vest, and again, this hybrid time between 8 and 10, I'd be more than happy to get you guys a trash picker upper or a vest, and you guys can take turns or having a group, just being on site and deterring some of the criminal activity that is out there.
So Austin, what about taking down the hut? And when I talked to Ben a few weeks ago, he said we legally do not need titles there because the soccer team doesn't need there. The Northwest Soccer League doesn't come in.
But there are still a lot of kids who go out and play soccer there.
I'm just saying, do they have to be there?
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Or
what
that
everybody
location,
that
yeah.
lives on the park to decide, and that's what Ben said.
Now, the thing is, if you take that amenity out of the park, what will that do if you increase positive activity in the park? So now they don't know if this goes there.
How often are those through?
That I'm not 100% sure. I can definitely take that back.
First of all, I'd like to commend you on getting most of the trees and things out so it's more visible in there. Because last fall, people had pulled down a Davenport down into that ravine and was partying there. Yeah.
So we called, and you guys did come out and take it out, but you didn't finish last fall. Are you planning on coming back out and finishing? Because we're the last house, and you guys did a really good job, and then you ran out of time.
I'm the first house, and I still have a lot of limbs and things and catching all their garbage.
But it makes it more beautiful, you know, you can see into the park where people can't be down in those woods. And are you planning on mowing that now that's cleared out?
One other thing, we have Park Patrol, that Parks hires patrol, a two-man unit to filter through different parks on the west side of town, and then we have one on the east side of town. And I think, Bill, was there issues, was it 2 summers ago, where you had asked Ben Page if he would put that park on the list? Okay.
Absolutely.
So,
That's not a tough issue.
right.
You know, it all comes down to funding, and I'll bend some arms to get it done.
Yeah, so we have.
Thank you, Jeremy.
We have. So, starting here shortly, we're going to have patrol officers patrolling the parks Friday, Saturday, and Sunday from 4 to 10. So that'll be coming up, and then maybe we could talk to Austin or Ben and see if we can get that put on the list for patrol.
Another suggestion is to maybe put motion-sensitive lights or whatever in that parking lot, so at night when people come and pull in there, the light turns on, and I was a drug dealer, I wouldn't get it, they're trying to do something under the light. And that might be an easy fix.
You said something about signs, and my son lives in Cleveland, and he said they have signage that says what the fine will be, and then there's a camera here. And do parks close? Like some parks, do they close at 10:30? Because I don't see it posted. And that's when the fireworks happen, like at 1 in the morning?
Oh, yeah, that park is notorious for having people there at all hours of the night, fireworks going off, and music blasting.
A couple of years ago, when we were having a lot of issues at other parks, we enforced park hours at sunset. I can check to make sure that that still is the case, but that's when we were enforcing and clearing out other parks that were having a lot of issues a few years ago. And that was sunset, and we would check with dispatch each night before we went and cleared the park to get the official sunset time. And when it was time, we would start warning people that they had to leave the park. And from that time on, then you could no longer be there.
So I don't think it's sunset anymore. Austin, are you familiar with the time? I want to say it's a 10 or a 10:30. Yeah, it's not a sunset anymore.
It is 10 p.m. or 10:30? Okay. We'll get clarification on that as far as whether it's sunset or it is a different time. Okay.
There's a lot of activity around the picnic tables. Last year I observed at least 30, mostly guys, jumping up and down, yelling at each other. That went on for a long time. I was surprised somebody didn't pull a gun at that time and shoot someone. It just went on and on. And you'll hear that all the time, and that's at the picnic tables. So that's away from the parking lot. So that's at least halfway down the park. So, and they run around, and some of them are driving their cars through that back area.
I know within the last month, we've had a few calls for service where people have pulled their vehicles out near the courts or near the gazebo, and they've had the music blasting, and
Right.
And we've walked out there and asked them.
Every weekend last summer, and they'd be out on those picnic tables.
So far, we haven't had any issues when we've addressed those folks. When we received the calls, asked them, and they've obviously pulled their vehicles back to the parking lot. But that does seem to be a popular idea for whatever reason.
Once the time is up for the end of the day, 10 or 10:30, whatever it is, and you've asked people to leave, will you be coming back to double check and make sure people have left and haven't recongregated after they've been told to leave because there really isn't any way to know if they're coming back unless somebody comes in and checks.
That's something that we can make sure does happen, just so people are aware. I think it's public knowledge. I don't know if everybody's aware of it or not, but our shifts come to an end at 11 p.m. And so the midnight patrol shift comes on at 9 p.m., so there is some overlap. But we could relay that to them if we have cleared the park and it's empty, and to have them check it as well.
One of the great things at that park is the community garden. There's, I don't know if it's 30, there's a lot of plots up there, and there's a lot of refugee families up there. It's really a beautiful thing to watch. I would hate to see that diminish because people are afraid to come to the park. It's awesome, and that's a lot of people up there. But I don't know if I see as many kids playing on the equipment as I used to. Okay.
But I think that, and then, again, I have a 10-year-old grandson, and he used to go all the time there. I don't go there anymore, and I know their parents, they are not taking their kids there, because, I mean, one occasion I took my grandson, and there was some kids smoking pot right next to him, and I'm like, no, and things like that, that you just don't want your kids around. So, yeah, it's encouraging a lot of people to go to the park.
I'm with you on that. My 9 grandkids, I'm not allowed to pick them up anymore.
Well, I was going to chime in on that. I've lived here for 37 years, and that park has always been a notorious problem. I don't think you can have any structures down there at all, other than the kaibos, the bathrooms. I think the park or the woods behind it is just an easy opportunity for them to exit, and also running to that where they did this time. This time doesn't need to be analyzed anymore, in my opinion, but it's just a constant problem down there. If you go down to the end of the street at night and you look down there, it's dark. Lights need to be put up, and or a camera, please. And it's like a drug dealing thing down there for 37 years. When I was a boy, there were kaibos down there, really nice ones. When I was about 5, they were burned to the ground because of God knows what. And then again when I was about 8. So the city never put them back up, and I don't blame them. So, they put up the wooden structures around the kaibos, and they're doing stuff in there. So I think they need to go. That's my opinion, and I don't know. We just keep going around and around about it.
Anybody else want to chime in?
So according to the website, Woodland Park closes at 10 p.m., so 10 p.m. is the close time. Which nobody told us. I have known you because every weekend now, with the weather getting better, hopefully, not today, but with the weather is at least every weekend, we have people over there, I mean, on the party, every weekend, for sure. 11, 12. 2, 3.
So that everybody's hearing this online, we're talking about cameras for the cops, the police department. We're talking about lights for parks, and maybe removing that wooden structure around the kaibos, and signs as well to say when the park closes and, you better be out of here. The neighborhood association is working to put together some other activities that would draw people into the park, which would be a legitimate activity, and hopefully increased traffic will help that. We're definitely looking for ideas on what kind of activities you would like to see in there, or even better, what activities you would like to help put on in there. So I don't know if you're an expert at pickleball, we need some pickleball people, or basketball, you want to organize a 3-on-3 tournament or something like that. I'm looking at Laura over here and thinking that she should put on a weightlifting clinic in the park? Yes, yes, definitely. The tennis courts, the basketball courts, all of that stuff should be utilized as much as possible. And if there's any way that we can encourage that, that's what we want to do as a neighborhood association. More play equipment?
So we haven't had an event since COVID hit, and I know that you sent out an email right before this meeting saying we were going to have some conversations about potential events coming up, and this is the perfect opportunity. The weather is getting nicer out. Let's start doing those events outdoors. Let's continue to be safe through these trying times, and we'll, hit both, two birds with one stone.
I'm all in.
It's pretty simple. The mayor has had a proclamation that you can't gather more than 30 people for quite some time. That's what the problem has been. I know just up the street in Tower Park, you just have Beaverdale Bluegrass, and it canceled last year, and we can't set anything up coming up until we know how the COVID is going to affect the numbers. So as much as we'd want to have people get together, and I think that's the best thing that we can ever do, to get together as a community, we have to make sure that we've got numbers down so we're not spreading more of the problems. So I love your plan. I mean, I love gatherings in parks, but until the mayor lifts the limit, we can't do a whole heck of a lot right now. Just, and I will say, bless your heart. We'd love to hear that. Every day will make me happy.
I know that park funds can be very limited. Can we open up a designated fund and people could donate to purchase things like these lights and signs and stuff?
Yeah, so I think the neighborhood association can pair up with the Friends of Des Moines. They are 503c and are happy to have that. I know a lot of the other parks have that same kind of push. I think Whitmer just got a lot of donations to that. So those go a long ways, absolutely. And I think one other thing, we're trending towards that proclamation of being lifted. It is 30 outside right now. And I think they're shooting closer to May. Hopefully we'll have something out and about for that.
2 weeks.
So I'd like to say one thing. I heard a lot of people talking in here about how they're not going to go to the park anymore, and they're afraid to go to the park. The more you're afraid to go to the park, the more stuff that's going to go on. You need, in my opinion, I remember when my kids were in high school, and I would be sitting over at Hoover at the football stadium, but I always went and walked out along down by the side where all the kids were messing around and goofing off. And I would tell you, an adult walking by, watching junior high or high school kids do stuff they shouldn't do, helps a whole lot. So I'm not recommending you go there at night and other things, but please go there during the day. Go there in the afternoon. And that will bring the park back quicker than anything, is people showing up out there at the playground, at the tennis courts, at other things. The more you leave them vacant, the more the wrong type of people that they're going to be there.
there's another thing that needs to happen. Like, Bob, I'm in that park 3 or 4 times a day walking through it, but I just can't take my grandkids up there. But we're not talking about the issue of the kids that caused this whole consternation. And I know that's no longer in your purview. You've sort of been kicked out of the schools. That's a relationship this community needs to work on. And I wrote some people in Des Moines. We both are teachers. We've been working on it, but we're just old ladies who've retired. So, but I think that's a relationship that something has to happen with that relationship, as well as more needs to happen for kids when they're in junior high so that they're not so susceptible. That's not totally in your ballpark either, but
So I'm going to tell you, we appreciate you being advocates for the police department and wanting SROs in the schools. So that relationship, I won't call it severed or gone. If the schools need us, they still call. They just don't have the SRO in the school. So we still provide services to them just like we do anyone else. I don't know, but if you, whatever you want to advocate for, you do what you think. But there's not a complete breakdown in a relationship there. Okay. Right. Right. It is different because then if the school calls, they have to wait. Now there's not an officer right there in the school, so they'll have to wait until an officer can get there.
And it's more than that. It's more than that because when kids would tell us stuff on grade, we could tell a counselor, we could tell a vice principal, we could tell somebody who would get the SRO involved without a lot of kids knowing that the SRO was involved. And so things could get taken care of before they turned into a shootout.
So I can appreciate that more than you probably realize. I used to supervise the school resource officer, so I was over that unit for a while. And it's about relationships. It really is about relationships. SROs built fabulous relationships in the schools. As a matter of fact, your neighborhood officer was an SRO. And so they build unbelievable relationships. I mean, if you ask Trudy, we could go somewhere right now, and students that went to East High School, which is where she was an SRO, that relationship is still there. So, yeah, it's about the relationship, and that component is missing because the officer is not in the school. So.
If I can say something now that you're talking about these kids, because we're talking about mainly kids that are getting involved in gangs and being influenced in a negative way. I was able to work for the juvenile court system for about 10 years, a few years ago. And one of the problems, and I work with Latino kids, and mainly one of the problems is that these kids don't have anything to do positive. And that's where, in my opinion, we need to start thinking out of the box and start providing those services, not services, but those activities that can keep them away from drugs or gangs or whatever. We really need to start doing that in conjunction with the schools, with the police department, and so they feel good going to the park, playing soccer. I created a soccer team at that time, but we had no place to play because there were not enough parks. So we need to create those spaces. Obviously, we need money at the same time, no? But we can be creative, I think.
Do you guys have anything else you want to say?
Real quick, can you give us an honest assessment? I was just assigned to this part of town March 8th, so literally the second day was coming just few blocks up the street. I hope you have noticed more of a presence in the last month of police cars at least driving through the area, cruising the side streets, not just up Lower Beaver and down Madison and back out of the neighborhood, but specifically the apartments up here, Tawana, the park, Valdez Court. That seems to be where, at least when I'm up here, getting flagged down. Some people are very grateful, and other people are you lost, and why are you on my street? To which is fine. But I hope in the last month you've at least maybe noticed that there are police cars up here more. I've encouraged the other officers to, if they're assigned to this area during their shift, to come up here and complete their paperwork, to cruise through the park on their random driving through the neighborhood. So I hope that's the case. We're open to feedback if you want that more. If you say, no, I have not seen a police car, let us know. Tell us. Yes?
Do you have any bicycle patrol? I know I used to live in Perry a long time ago, and they actually had officers that did a lot of things on bikes. And I just wondered if maybe if you had officers with bikes that could actually go into the park and maybe patrol within the park and not just make the loop with the car, if that might have some impact?
That is not something that we currently have. I know there was a young lady who lives right on the corner of Lawn Woods and Tawana with the wood fence around the property. And I've talked to her a couple times, and I have parked in the parking lot, got out and walked the park because of the people hanging out down over the hill behind the gazebo or parking out at the gazebo. So that's something we tried to implement, was not just cruising through, but getting out and hoofing it around the park to see what else is there.
Get your 10,000 steps in.
Yeah, which obviously is not something I need to do. But that's something we tried to do, is to not just cruise through and leave, is get out, walk around, and be more visible.
So we do have bike patrol, but typically is special events and in the downtown area because they're so close to the station in that area. Outside in the neighborhoods, it would be extremely difficult for an officer to be able to be on a bike and then have to respond to another call because they're however many yards away from their vehicle. So that's why we don't do the bike patrol as much here outside the downtown area. And I only think probably there's a couple officers that ride the bikes in the downtown area. But we do have a bike patrol, but not a patrol that's dedicated specifically just to bicycles.
I just didn't know if they had something like they could put on the back of an SUV or something and maybe just take a cruise through a park and then be able to take off again with the vehicle.
In a perfect world, probably yes, but in our world, no. Because now there's another expense to the city, so now we've got to purchase bikes, bike racks. Got to get officers in shape more so maybe to ride a bike too, right? Who is? Where did he go? Oh, he's right there. Huh?
Are you seeing police cars enough?
Yeah, I've
Yes,
seen it.
no.
Well, there's still the cars that do the things in the parking lot, so, when you do see the cars doing the things that you think they're doing, because you really don't know what they're doing in the parking lot, would it be best to call, is it 283-4811? I think
Yes.
I have that memorized. And really, we can all call. The more we all call, the more you all come, the less maybe they'll think it's a good place for them to come. So it's best to call that number, not 911, unless it's, unless it's March 9th.
Right.
Another way to think about this is perhaps it's more about parks, what parks can do than what the police can do. Because then you get at the issue of kids not being busy. Activities for kids. When we moved, we've been on the park 45 years on one side or the other. And when we moved here, one of the reasons we stayed on the park was because every day there were 3 people up there doing softball activities, watching the little pool. And I know we don't have money for that, but maybe we need to figure out where that money could come from. If there were good activities and a couple of teenagers up there running activities, this other stuff wouldn't be happening. So having positive activities in the park, sponsored by Park District, would require some money, but wouldn't require the police unless there was some problem, but the problems would be diminished.
And just in regards to that, when I was working with juveniles, I always thought prevention is way cheaper than getting those kids in Mara Hall or in another place, and it's like a revolving door. And I mean, it's expensive for society in general, obviously, but I don't think the authorities see that. I don't think they see it, because at that time, and that was a few years back, I asked for money for teams, for different things, and nobody responded. So I don't know how we can make others see that. I don't know. But it is important. I think we're talking about kids at the end of the day. Now, one thing, if you want to put a camera on my treehouse down the park, I pay the electric bills. I'm just saying.
Does Parks want to say anything?
So I've definitely heard all of your concerns, and like I said, I've got notes here, so I'll pass that on to Ben and Ron Ward, who's our Parks Director as well, and see if we can make any of those work and make that happen. So signage, and we talked about the hut and lights, all of that. So I'd be happy to pass that on. Jeremy has my information as well, so if you'd like to get a hold of me, I'd be more than happy to have you guys pass that on to me, and I can pass that on as well.
Yes, we'll keep in touch with him, for sure.
You'll call him every day.
I don't know about every day. He might get sick of me, but we didn't introduce them, but I don't know if you recognize them because of their masks. We have Councilman Gray. Do you want to say anything, sir?
I'll be happy to, and I'll say the three words that everybody wants to hear. I'll be brief. Anything that we've talked about here today can be accomplished. I can work with Ben Page for the things that we need to do at the lights and the like. I can work with our fine police officers to see if we can get cameras up and get more patrols up. It's all of us together are going to make this happen. I hope that we just witnessed something last month that was an aberration, but you never take that into consideration. As you look through a lot of the parks in the city, and the ones I keep close in contact with are Ward 1, we kind of have, anytime you have a park and it's open and you get parking, there's going to be illegal activity. It just seems to be a magnet for everything. So we need to make sure that when we get these things put together, all of the neighbors take a look around, because you guys, all of us here, are the eyes and ears for our Des Moines Police Department. They can come out and do a lot of things when they know that something's going on. So don't be afraid. If you feel that it's not an emergency, there's another number you can use, 283-4811, but if you dial 911, it doesn't really make any difference. We take all those calls all the same. So make sure that our area is safe. If you see something that doesn't look right, it probably isn't right. Make sure you call in and just get it. For us to dispatch, we got the police already out there. Always remember, it doesn't cost us any more. Just give a call, say something doesn't look right here, and let's make this thing right. I talked to forestry. They got rid of those bushes back there where people could hide behind. So things are getting better as we go along. But it takes all of us to make this thing happen. So don't be afraid to call somebody. Don't be afraid to call me. Email me. I'll always say Jeremy first, but So all I'm saying is that let's make this thing happen. We're all a community here. We want to make this safe. We want to have kids there. We want to have grandkids there. My grandkids love to go to the parks. So don't miss an opportunity. Don't sit back and watch things being taken over by people that don't live around here. We're the community. We make things happen in here, and this is going to be a safe place. That's why we all live around here. So those are my thoughts, Jeremy.
Thank you for being brief. So on introduce Supervisor Connolly, did you want to say anything, ma'am? You're good? She says thank you. Senator Peterson, would you like to say anything?
I'll use the microphone because I'm hard of hearing and masks make it so hard to hear people. So thank you to the Des Moines Police Department for being here. Thank you to Parks and Rec and our city council and Angela Conley. I just think this is the greatest neighborhood ever, and for all of you coming out, I wish I had better news on the gun front from the State House, but unfortunately, laws have been passed and the governor signed that are making it easier for people to access guns. And so it's going to take all of us working together to try and keep our neighborhoods safe. And if there are things that I can do, I want to be here to help. This is my walk route. I do it nearly every day. I want to be safe in this neighborhood too. So thank you so much for coming out and for caring enough to do some positive things.
Thank you, thank you. If there was one thing that the officers could tell us that we should do to make our neighborhoods safer, that we can work together to do, what would it be?
Can I say two things?
Don't take mine.
Go to the park as much as you possibly can and call dispatch when there's something that you don't like.
I have to echo Brady. It's not a bother. I know I've encountered people who think, oh, they don't want to bother the police. It's not a bother. That's our job. And we want to make sure that you guys are safe and that you're comfortable in your community and that you utilize us because we want to be there. We want to show up and we want to, team up with you guys to make your community safe. So please do not hesitate to call. We go to barking dogs. So if you think there's a drug deal going on, call. The other thing is, I had another one. What was it? Oh, talk to your neighbors. Talk to your neighbors. Get familiar with your neighbors. And then also, here's a plug. The police department we have I guess it's like a database for cameras. So maybe you didn't know about the crime, but if you had cameras and we had a list of your address and your contact information, even though you didn't know that crime happened, we would come to you and ask you permission to see your camera footage to help solve the crimes in the neighborhood. So, and you can, I think that's on the city website.
I believe, or maybe on the department website.
Yeah, department website.
It's for like your Ring cameras, those that have like a ring or, something that faces the street. Those are there for that assistance. So, and like Trudy said, you may not recognize that something happened, but if you log or give us your address and say that you're willing to share the video, then when we canvass the neighborhood, we know which neighbors to come to if something were to happen. So.
And that's what happened with me this time with the shooting. They came to my house and we were able to give them the video, and we saw the car because we logged into that long time ago.
And with that said, we don't have access by signing up with the program. It's basically just giving us information that you have cameras, and then we would ask you to share that. So we're not by any means like hacking into cameras or anything like that. That was some concerns at some other meetings, but no. It's just letting us know that you have those, and then we are able to come to you and ask you to share that.
And just what the sergeant and Trudy said, and Councilman Gray, so yes, we're available. Now we have dispatchers that are designated for 911 and designated for the 2834811. So the non-urgent calls need to come to that 2834811 because we don't want to tie up that 911 line and then have an urgent call can't get through because we're talking about whatever else there may be. So just make sure that we're using that 2834811 unless it's an urgent call. If it needs a 911, then you dial 911. and then we're there. But they do prioritize the calls, and so we just need to make sure we leave that 911 designated for 911 calls. Our communications people will be extremely upset with me.
I don't have really any information other than a lot of folks want them back. And that's something that the Des Moines Public Schools and the police department are going to have to work out. But the more I think the community asks for it, I think they can work it out. I hope they do. I know that we're just starting our children's mobile crisis, hopefully July 1st, and 22% of our calls are now children, so it's up a lot, and they're gonna continue to go to schools, and police always come, thank God. You know, we can't forget, and thank you for all the men and women in blue, 365 days a year, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, they're here to serve us. So no matter what kind of call they are on the streets helping us every single day, and that's what I try to tell these people that want, they don't want police officers coming for children. This children's mental health, we have to make sure everyone is safe, no matter who gets the call and where it goes. So back to your question, I think they're going to resolve this issue. They're getting a lot more calls in schools. Not only AHART, also I think Des Moines Police Department.
Well, friends, I will offer one more plug here just as we wrap up. The Neighborhood Association loves to get together and have meetings. We haven't been able to do that because of COVID. But we are hoping to be able to do that very soon because we're expecting COVID to be gone with the vaccine, right?
Yep.
Yeah? Right. Right. So we're hoping that we'll be able to meet again very, very soon. In the meantime, I will tell you that one of the things that we do with the association is that we have an Adopt a Park program, and you can find a link to that on our website. And basically, Adopt a Park is where you volunteer to walk through the park, and if you see any problems with the equipment or activity or litter or things like that, you let us know, and we respond to that. We either get parks involved if we need to, or somebody goes down and just cleans it up, whatever needs to happen. But we would love for you to volunteer just to walk through the park. You sign up for a month at a time, and it's just a fantastic, in fact, it's even won awards. The program has won awards, so it's pretty cool. And it's not hard, it's really easy. We'd love for you to do that. Then also, the other thing is, if you haven't got signed up to our e-newsletter, make sure to sign up for that, and you can find a link for that on lowerbeaver.org. We would love to put you on the newsletter and make sure you get all the news that we send out, which doesn't happen too terribly often because there's not a lot going on right now, but hopefully soon. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Have a great evening.